All right. Um, so thank you for coming again. This is our third meeting. Um, I just gonna, I am gonna start also with, just going briefly over those ground rules again, just so that we can remember them and set the intention for the space. Um, so I'm going to share the screen. And once I'm able to get to my slideshow,
There you go.
well,
I can't mute.
I'm just waiting for it to actually let me, or maybe if I do this, there we go. Okay. So just to briefly set the ground rules again, to remind there's never been a single right way to pray in the Jewish tradition. And that if you look at different, even if the Siddur is the same, the content is the same, the way people have approached it have been so radically different. That what I say is not, it's certainly not the word of God. It's not even the word of the whole tradition. Um, and also, hopefully, you could take something away from what we talk about, but it's certainly okay to disagree or and whatever you don't like, leave it aside. Um, Again, when we're talking about prayer, we're talking about God, but I recognize that in our community, people have very different understandings of God, of the G word. So, that I've said this before, but some people have a more literal or more traditional understanding. Some people have more metaphorical or more mystical understandings. And for others, the G word doesn't work. But that it's important to remember that our ideas about God cannot be reduced to a single simple idea. I want to also just say something on that. One of the things I always love is discussing with there are atheists who are very militant. Really like they want to convince you. And I have many friends who are atheists. I've been spent time years of my life as an atheist. You know, but the ones who I often find really they're trying to convince me that their idea of what God is wrong. Um, but they have no idea what my idea of God is. They make assumptions. So just, people, there's no single idea.
I have to turn yours off because I don't have anything to
Um,
hear.
just want to make sure people are muted if you have anything going on in the background there. Um, and just by and large, we live in this vast, infinite universe, so we are equally humbled standing in front of this vast universe, and that all approaches to how to deal with that are welcome here. Um, Finally, whether the concept of God is what works for you, I think we think functionally, how does God touch our lives? I think helps us define what living a good life is by purpose, ethics, um, sense of gratitude, that looking at the world as good, having more self-understanding, getting to our deepest parts of ourselves and our soul, and also the sense of transcending who we are. That's generally different ways that I think you can classify how God touches our lives. Okay. Um, I'm going to just start just briefly going over what are the traditional parts of the Shabbat morning service, but to recognize that different services are going to function differently. And also, depending on what Siddur you use, some of this may not even be in the Siddur that you use. So I'm going to just start. Um, and it's also all those, and I know that certain parts of what are on the screen today that we at Anshe Emet we don't do regularly, and certain parts that are on the screen I know that in Temple Israel they don't do, for different reasons actually. So I'll just start the first part. We have our morning blessings. Um, Oftentimes these in many synagogues these are assumed to be done at home, and I'll show you some of the morning blessings and ways in which, especially I remember, I don't remember who had asked about taking prayer home or outside of services. Morning blessings are actually one way to do that. Then we have Sukkot Zimra, or verses of song. We talked a little bit about that our first meeting, because our first meeting we talked about biblical prayer, and so many of the songs are from the Psalms or from the Bible. Then we have the reading of the Shema and its blessings, and the morning Amidah. We talked about morning Amidah last week. Um, the Torah service, um, Musaf, which is a second service, which is not done on weekdays, but is done, on special days like Shabbat, holidays, and Rosh Chodesh. And then you have these ending readings like Ein Kelohenu or and Aleinu. Just one point about Aleinu is that that's one of the latest additions. That Aleinu really was part of the High Holiday service, but it was popular, so it got appended onto the end of services in the medieval period, and it also gave a place for mourners to say Kaddish. The things I want to, one thing just to point out, like I know that so in Temple Israel, you guys use Mishkan Tefillah, I believe, and Mishkan Tefillah doesn't have Musaf. Musaf is an Amidah that recounts the temple sacrifices, and I think in general the Reform movement has has taken a stance on temple sacrifice and its memory, and so there is no Musaf in the Mishkan Tefillah. Um, we at Anshe Emet, I think, as our way to sort of limit the length of the service, don't do Psuke de Zimra, the verses of song. And many places have done this sort of with the assumption people will do it at home. Whether people do it at home or not is, up in the air. Okay. So I just want to move to morning blessings. So first, I don't know, I can't see people's hands, but in general, people familiar with Modani,
Hmm.
some people do it,
Okay.
and, um, so when I was taught as a kid is that Modani is what you say, we sit at the top immediately upon waking up. Modani l'fanecha melachai v'kayam shechazarta bi nishmati b'chemla rabba emunatecha. I was taught it in school with a tune, although it was just a chanty tune. Modani l'fane. Um, but this was what I was taught to say as soon as you wake up. I just want to point out a couple things about it. One of my favorite things about it is the last line, Rabba emunatecha, abundant is your faithfulness. And we not often talk about people having faith in God, but here that the very first prayer that we say, the very first thing that one would say upon waking up is that God has faith in us. And there's a practical explanation for it in that we've survived, we've woken up to see another day. God's given us another chance. So you get the sense God has a lot of faith in us. But I think that it's just an interesting idea that we have this, that we've been blessed to live another day, and that shows a certain amount of faith in who we are. Um, I'm going to stop sharing just for a second. For people who are familiar with this, with the modality, any thoughts about it? Uh, any experiences with it that you want to share? And it's okay if not.
I love
Uh,
it.
I say it every morning when I wake up and have for several decades. It was not something I was taught as a child, but the idea that you wake up and the first thing you do is be grateful.
Right.
It's a wonderful mindset.
There,
I don't do it as often as I'd like. Sometimes I forget because I'm so groggy. It's a practice I'm trying to get into, but I see it a lot like the like it's a reminder. It's just a reminder of the mitzvot. It's a reminder, like you said, to put it in a mindset. You know.
yeah. I'm with you on that in terms of the sometimes I'm too groggy and I forget. I also have a slightly different practice that I from another tradition that we'll talk about in a moment of something else that people have said while waking up within the Jewish tradition.
Oh, I'd
But
like to hear that. One other thing, I was listening to a podcast on Bashalak today,
mhm.
and they were talking about, Az Yashir is part of morning davening too, and the
Yes,
idea that we face the sea every day.
yes,
and and
yeah,
God is coming to save us. And that's a part of Modani.
right. Yes, that's within modality. So Az Yashir is the Song of the Sea, which was in this which was in the Parsha this week. So, and it's also part of the Psuke de Zimra, and I'll talk about it a little bit when we get to Psuke de Zimra. I think there's a fun practice that I learned from somebody who used to write the Jewish calendar for one of the Jewish calendars for the conservative movement had a practice that I learned about. All right, I'm gonna share the screen again, and we're gonna go to the next thing. Right, I have to stop sharing and share it again for it to work. Okay. 1 second. Did the screen? I don't know. I keep having issues with this. So I can't see what it doesn't show me that things are changing on my screen. Uh,
You just put up the Moda Ani.
yeah,
You can see it, but generally when you're running a Zoom, it helps if you can have two screens.
that's makes a lot of sense.
And now you have the ritual for morning. And now gratitude for the gift of the soul.
Let me see. So, okay, gratitude for a gift of the soul. I think that's so one of there are many parts to the morning blessings, but I just want to point out one I think is really beautiful. And people have brought it up. And it also, I think there's another difference here between some of the movements. Um, so I look this first line, Elohai neshama shenatata bi tahorahi, my God, the soul which you gave into me, endowed me with, is pure. And I think that also is just a wonderful thing to think about in the morning. That sometimes we can to start from this place of just simpleness and purity. Oh, more people to admit. I don't remember. I think it was somebody here was saying that they when they learned this, they didn't, oh, this was a story I'd heard recently from a rabbi out in California, who she is a Jew by choice, and part of her journey for becoming a rabbi was once she married, her husband was Jewish, and when they went to services, she pointed out to this line, and she said, "Did you know about this?" And her husband, who wanted nothing to do with Judaism, said, "I actually had no idea that was in our tradition." But the idea that we start with a pure soul, I think, is kind of beautiful. One of the things just to point out, though, is that there is an interesting difference between the different movements. This version of the blessing is from the Siddur we use at Anshe Emet, from the Siddur Chadash, and it ends with the last line is, hold on, let me just move. I have to move you to see it. Baruch atah Adonai hamachazir neshamot livgarim meitim. Praised are you, O Lord, who has restored me to a new day of life, which is not a direct translation. The translation is who has returned the soul to those who are sort of close to death. And for, the rabbis believed that like sleep was somewhat like death, and that there was this sort of renewal of life upon waking up. And this idea that your soul, which was gathered during sleep up back to heaven, is now being put back into your body.
Is it 64th percent of death? Sleep
It's
was
1/60th. Sleep is
1/60th.
1/60th, which an easy way to 1/60th is the same number for if you drop a piece of cheese into your meat pot. If it is if it's a 60th of the total volume, then it's still kosher. So it's 1/60. It's nullified. It's a small enough to be nullified.
Now you're getting to the oven of Anakai, but that's another thing.
Right.
One of the things I always think is interesting about the morning prayers, as opposed to sort of like the Amidah, the rest of the Tefillah, is sort of the presence of death, and that as a contrast to sort of intentionality, right? And like what does slightly more existential in terms of like what does this day mean sort of before me, in a way that like Amidah, a lot of the other Tefillah is filled of requests. I always thought that contrast was different, and like in Modeh Ani, because of this like bittul of death, like the name of God is absent, right? Because you're not yet washed and purified. So I always thought those were sort of interesting elements to morning prayers in contrast.
And I think, Max, you're bringing up also, even as a side note, you had mentioned washing, and for many people, the very first thing that they'll do after they wake up is wash their hands ritually. There is some of that comes from various older beliefs, but the idea of cleanliness is part of it. But ritual, this ritual cleaning and this separating yourself from death is part of these morning blessings. Yes, absolutely. Um, we're not going to go through all the morning blessings, but I want to show you. I want to just to share here, just to take a look at the. This is from Mishkan Tefillah. Oop, sorry. Which I know they use in Catskill. If you look at the blessing at the end. Here, Baruch atah Adonai asher biado nefesh kol chai v'ruach kol basar ish. Praised are you, Adonai, in whose hand is every living soul and the breath of humankind. And it's interesting that there was this shift of language in the Reform movement. But we have our community is diverse, and people use different sidurim in the Columbia Green counties. So it's really interesting to see how that change. Okay. So next, I want to come to this is where the ritual, I said a different ritual that I have done, although it is when you're groggy in the morning, it's even harder. Is actually around the morning blessings. What they really the real term morning blessings apply to these blessings. I don't know if do you I don't know if in Catskill, if we don't do it in Anshe Emet. In Catskill, do you guys do the Asher Natan Sechvi Bina Lafrim Ben Yom Uven Laila? Do you do those blessings?
Sometimes
Sometimes.
the rabbi changes the service slightly depending on how long she expects Torah service to be.
Okay, that makes sense. Um, in many of the modern Orthodox communities that I've been in, they have dropped saying these in services because of actually the opening three blessings in the traditional version are different, and they're a little more troubling. You have here we have, like, for example, the blessing who made us in his image. The traditional blessing would have been said by men, which was, who did not make us a woman.
Mhm.
Um, that was, and I did once ask my old Rosh Yeshiva, and he had about it, and he said, I say that blessing, and he said, until we actually live in a society where women are equal, then I have to recognize for him, it's a point of recognition. He says he uses it as his reminder of the fact that we still live in a society with sexism. I don't know whether that explanation works for everybody. It didn't work for me. I don't say this. I don't say the traditional blessings. I prefer newer versions of it, like the one we have in our Siddur. Um,
But that's fascinating. That was Rav Avi.
that was Rav Linzer, Dov Linzer.
Linzer, okay. But it's an interesting explanation for why he does.
Yes, yeah. Um, those three blessings at the beginning here. I'll just not the very first one. The blessing here, the translation's a little off. It says for bestowing the ability to distinguish between day and night. It actually is for giving the rooster the ability to determine the difference between day and night. Um, your alarm clock in certain rural areas, certainly, and in the ancient world. I do know in Hudson that I've been woken up by roosters. I do not get woken up by roosters in Yonkers. Um, this list of blessings, we can look at them and say sort of simple gratitude, and I think that is very easy to say. For the translation here is not very accurate. It's more it's definitely a poetic translation. But so, for example, we see for giving us the capacity to see. The blessing is actually who opens the eyes of the blind or gives sight to the blind. Um, for releasing the oppressed is really for freeing the captives. So there are some translation differences. The reason I want to point that out is this is a practice that is talked about in Talmudic sources. It works a little better if you go by the Sephardic order. So I'm going to show the Sephardic order. So in the Talmud, one rabbi talks about, when he hears the rooster crow in the morning, then he says, immediately upon hearing it, he said the first blessing. Who gives us the ability to distinguish between day and night. And as he opens his eyes, and those things probably happen at the same time, he'll also say, for giving us the ability to see, or for giving sight to the blind. And then as soon as he stretches and moves, for releasing captives, and then standing up for raising those who are bent, and then getting dressed for clothing the naked. And that each step in the morning becomes something you can bring intentionality to. You can bring awareness of something beyond yourself, or that gratitude for each step, even as you're doing it. Um, the one for giving strength to the weary. I think that I often have done sort of as I walk as well. I do the sort of the when your feet touch the ground and taking steps. I do those together, but sometimes it's fun to do it after you drink coffee, because that's definitely a place where you feel, where you get that feeling or that sense of I'm getting strength for the weary. Um, and that each one of these blessings has is something that connects to something that you could do in the morning if you do it in services. And I think one of the reasons a lot of people did it in services is that people didn't necessarily know the blessings. So if you do it in services, or you do it at a later time, um, then there are a lot of people have taught or begin teaching actually doing sort of physical motions along with it. Rabbi Sam Feinsmith from IJS, I remember him. He was my college roommate. But I remember many years ago, he taught the idea that, when he talks about, like, when you prepare steps for, he'll actually like walk in place and just do these physical motions to remind himself of his ability in each moment. Um, of course, the downside, it's not a downside, but it's also a moment to recognize that we don't all
I'll turn
actually
it down.
have these abilities. There are people in our
Turn it
community who
down.
can't see, people in our communities who can't move. But that being said, I want to just share a story. I'm gonna stop sharing the screen. The Talmud teaches a story of there was a rabbi, I believe it is Rav Sheshet. I don't remember which rabbi, but a rabbi who was known to be blind, and he would walk at night, and he was walking at night, and he's holding a torch. So somebody stopped and said, "Rabbi, what do you need a torch for? You can't see." And he says, he's like, "I can't see, but other people can. And I'm holding this torch so that other people can help me if I need it." So these abilities and being thankful for them is both recognizing that we're lucky if we can scratch off every blessing, check off every blessing, we're lucky for that. But also in general, the idea that we can also use those abilities to help others around us and to help those who might not have them. So if you have extra clothes, to clothe the naked. If you can see and can help somebody who can't, then do so. If you can move and help somebody who can't, then do so. And it becomes a motivation for the day.
Rabbi,
Yes.
in Orthodox Jewish women's circles, there are often prayer groups, and each woman will go through the morning blessings to let everybody else say Amen. So
Yes.
together, and that's a way to get to your 100 blessings a day. Is if
Oh,
you're amening each person, if 8 or 9 or 10 of you get together and everybody runs through the morning blessings and everyone else says Amen every time someone says them.
right. So
That's a common practice.
I think you're bringing up this idea of 100 blessings. And I don't know if everyone's heard of this, but there is a famous rabbinic teaching that one should say 100 blessings every day. It's one of the reasons why our Siddur is full of blessings, is it helps people get to that number. Um, and actually, it's reminding me of a general point about the structure of the Siddur. Is all of these sections that I pointed out even at the very beginning, all of those sections, they're not, the Talmud doesn't have them all stitched together the way we have it in one service or one. They actually have the idea of making morning blessings is separate. The idea of saying blessings, Psuke de Zimra, these verses of song, is talked about separately. The blessings over the Shema talked about separately, and then over time they get sort of stitched together into one sort of long service. Um, yes, please, Wendy.
Can so when I first read the for being able to see blessing, my first thought, since I don't see until I put my glasses on, or I don't see until I'm really super close to something, if see can be interpreted just more metaphorically, being able to just see with your mind and with your heart and just, more broadly without just your eyes. Or are these
Yeah.
very literal?
No, you don't have to. The thing is, I think none of these have to be taken literally. I think that's the great, I've, if, here I'll say, how the sausage is made religiously. One of the things that makes a religious ritual last and be meaningful is the fact that they are able to be interpreted in multiple ways, and that I think it's important to like that it wasn't, they didn't say this has to be literally done this way, and that it was done in different contexts. And I think it gives people the space to find new meanings in it, and to find ways to understand it. That being said, I am definitely thinking that as my eyesight has definitely started to diminish and I become more and more reliant on glasses, that I may actually say, the Pokeach Ivrim blessing after I put on my glasses now instead of as soon as I open my eyes. So I may actually change my timing based off of that. But that's me taking it literally.
Right.
Okay, let's move on here a little. Let me. All right, yeah, I have to remember to do this different. Here. Let me just. Beginning. Oh, I don't know what it's doing. All right, do you see it says Psuke de Zimra verses of song?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm not going to show the whole thing, but as you could see, even from the page numbers, it's a large section. Um, what I'm going to show Joe is that this is one of three. We talked about blessing, a series of blessings last class. That one of the ways that prayers are put together, are written in the Siddur, is in what's a blessing series. And in the morning services have at least three major ones. And if you do Musaf, four major blessing series, and Psuke de Zimra is one of them. A blessing series begins with Baruch in the first paragraph, and often the end of that blessing will end with Baruch, and then every other blessing that comes afterwards doesn't begin with Baruch. It begins with some other word, but it still ends with a blessing that begins with Baruch. And I'll show you what I mean in a moment. So here we have the beginning of Psuke de Zimra. Baruch She'amar. I want to just point out one word that one line that I always love in this. Um, the This line, Baruch Omer ve'oseh, right? Um, Here, the translation is not is not great. It's very it's interpretive, but the literal translation is Baruch Omer ve'oseh, blessed is the one who says and does. And one of the things that I like about that is that, especially if we look at the story of creation, that unlike many ancient traditions, God is both the one who commands and the one who does it. Meaning, it's like unlike a king. We often compare God to a king. God as a king, though, is very different. Though, rather than commanding and other people following the commands, God creates the world. God is the one who does the melacha, right? God is the one who does the work of creation. God doesn't command others to do it. If you look in other ancient mythologies and things like that, there are higher gods who command aspects of creation to lower gods and enslave them. So here, the idea that no, God is the one who does it. I always like that line. The other thing about this opening series of Baruchs is that each one of these elements of it are found in the later pages of quotations of Psalms and parts of the Bible. And it's all the concepts that get discussed in the Bible that get discussed in those biblical texts are here in this first list. But when I was talking about a blessing series, you see here, it really starts here. Baruch atah Adonai, it starts with that language. And we see again at the end here, if I go to the next page, you can see it better. Baruch atah Adonai, praised are you, Lord God. And then at the end of this opening paragraph, again, Baruch atah Adonai melech mulal b'tishbachot, praise are you, Lord, sovereign, adored with praise. And just what is it about? Here we have this with the songs of your servant David, I think really captures what it's about, that we're about to say all of these psalms. And the point is that just like David did, and we talked about, I think, in our first class of the that we rely very heavily on our ancestors and how they praised God in our traditional Siddur, and that for us it also is an opportunity to think of who in our lives we have who in our lives have given us wisdom in ways that we can look at the world with gratitude, make ethical decisions, and giving us the words that we need to express ourselves and express just the wonderful, hopefully the wonderful world we're trying to build. And then we see at the end, the closing blessing is all the way at the end is this prayer Yishtabach. And in Anshe Ameth, we start just before this. Usually in traditional services, the chazan, the service leader, doesn't lead Psuke de Zimra, but they start with the end of Psuke de Zimra. And you'll see again here, this long blessing. Praised are you, exalted God and sovereign, thanksgiving to you, author of wonders, who delights in hymns of praise, our God and sovereign, life of the universe. So again, this idea of we're doing the coda of Psuke de Zimra, that we've read all of these psalms of praise. I just wanted to point that out. And that's just for one part of the point of this class is give people the ability to navigate the Siddur a little better and understand how the sections are set up. Any section that begins with Baruch, and then the next paragraph, or doesn't have another, if once you get to the last Baruch, that you've ended that section. If that makes sense. I'm just going to show. Sorry. Some of the things that are in Psuke de Zimra. We talked a lot about Ashrei already, but Ashrei is in that section. I always like this psalm. There's a series of 5 psalms in a row that are always in this section of prayer of Psuke de Zimra. It's Psalms 146 to 150. I always like this one, Kol Hanshama Hallelujah, Hallelujah. There are really lovely tunes to it. Everything that breathes, praise God. And I like the idea that breathing as a way to as that breath itself is a form of praise. That when we breathe, we are praising. In a sense, we're giving gratitude, we're giving recognition to the world around us. Okay. And then finally, as we go on to the next section, I'm going to stop sharing in just a moment. There's Kaddish. And the Kaddish, just to point out, Kaddish is basically anytime a section ends or a new section is going to begin, there's a Kaddish, with one major exception, which we'll see later. Just practically speaking, because I know not everybody knows this, but this line here, Yehei Shmei Rabba Mevorach Le'olam U'Me'el Maya, may God's great name be praised for all eternity. That's the Talmud says that whoever says that with all of their might, it doesn't necessarily mean to yell it, but just to say it with sort of full feeling and intention, that if all of Israel says it, then the Messiah will come. So it's considered to be an important line, and usually in services, when we get to this line, the whole congregation says it together. Right. Just want to stop for a second. Any questions on that section so far? Any comments? Okay. All right, so I'm going to get to the Baruch Hu and the recitation of Shema, and I've got a little bit more to say on that because we already talked a lot about Psuke de Zimra in our first class. Okay. Hold on. Okay. The next section, which is also a blessing series, it's really the Shema and its blessings, but there's Baruch Hu beforehand. It's a call to prayer. Just to point out, the morning readings of the Shema has 2 blessings before the Shema and 1 blessing after. And and the evening one has 2 blessings before and 2 blessings after. Okay. So yeah, I'm going to talk more about the call to prayer and Baruch Hu next class, so I'm not going to go into it so much. But this is something where whether you're getting called up to the Torah or you're getting or you're leading services, it's something that is often said. In fact, this is there's a story. It's actually the story that's usually told as the origin of Mourner's Kaddish, but the story predates the origin of Mourner's Kaddish. That the idea that when a child is blesses in the congregation, that's somehow that's good for their parents' soul in a sense, whatever that means. Many different ways of understanding it, but one of the implications of it is that saying this blessing, this call to prayer, where everybody responds, that's part of what it means to that is a way of showing that you're taking that you have a voice in the community, that your voice is one that other people are responding to. You're bringing our community together for prayer. So we'll talk more about that next week. All right. The reason I wanted to show you this page is that the opening blessing of the Shema here is on page 224. The ending blessing here, which is 224, is on 236, and that's one single blessing. And it's several pages of blessings, of a single blessing. Even though there is also a series of blessings, there's actually, as I said, 3 blessings total. The first blessing actually takes multiple pages. And if you look at the lines of the Baruch, the line with Baruch in it, you can really get a sense of what is the point of this blessing. What's it all about? This one here, we say that, praise are your Lord, ruler of the universe, who forms light and creates darkness, who ordains the harmony of creation. Which is, more literally means who makes peace, forms light, creates darkness, who makes peace and creates everything. And then here again, praise are you, O Lord God, creator of the heavenly lights. There's so much to say even about just these blessings, just these lines. But there's one thing I want to point out that is when we get to this section, the Yotzer Or of Reichoshe, this is the origin of that original blessing, who creates or fashions light and creates darkness, makes peace and creates woe, not who creates everything. Uvore Ra, which means bad or even evil in some cases, like the tree of knowledge, of good and of good and evil. It's Ra is the word there. So this idea that God made everything, even that which is bad, I think is an interesting idea, and it's challenging in a sort of, especially in a post-Holocaust world. It's challenging, but I think there's a lot of meaning behind it. I actually want to just see if does anybody have any thoughts on this? That the idea that we have this verse, that we reflect on this verse, that God has created everything, including that which is bad.
Well, going back to this week's Parsha, we're free and the seas split and we've had miracles and wonders and pillars of fire and an awful lot of Egyptians die.
Right. So that's very interesting. So that even, and what we might have seen as good in some way, whether, that there is that in, every dark cloud has a silver lining, but we also break a glass at a wedding, that even a wonderful clear day, we might get a dark cloud every now and then. So that that there's good and bad in almost everything. That's certainly a powerful take.
And the thought that comes to my mind, even though it seems to be so much difficulty and bad, just like so much, is that we appreciate the good, or maybe the peace or the good, even more so when we don't have it all the time.
Right. That's a really good, that is also a really, really an interesting point and really important.
I like to think of it as if the source of powers, the cosmic majesty, God, whatever you want to call it, all things have been created, including all chemical reactions, and there are good chemical reactions, bad chemical reactions. It's a balance. It's an ecosystem. It's like the yin and yang. You can't have one without the other. You can't be purified or cleanse things if they don't need to be cleansed.
Right. Oh,
And it's a means to an end. It is the process.
um,
I,
mhm.
for me, it's just that the creative force has created everything and continues to since the Big Bang. And the natural world has a lot of things in it that are terrible, including death, including suffering, including disease. And it's just part of the that's it. That's the creative process in action. And I love that the Torah has such fear of God, as whatever we mean by God, but such fear of that source, because the people acknowledge in Torah that there's also this destructive power. It's not simply a God of compassion. It's a God of fire and destruction too.
Oh, it's wonderful. Wow.
And I think that's incredibly important to live with and to take in.
Well,
So,
also, I think the translation of fear is a bit two-dimensional when it's into
Mhm.
English and largely based on the Christian translation. But it's not just fear; it's awe.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's combination.
Right.
yeah. But, our God is not simply a loving, sweet, you know,
No, it's true. Well, he's not here, but I know Reuven, Roger, often they would talk about this in the Monday Night Torah classes that that there's good and evil within us, and to the degree to which we talk about God as that we are made in the image of God, it's also a way to recognize that you can't. That I think this is. I'm going to not get political here, but almost political in that. So I think one of the big problems I think that the world faces is that we keep dividing people into their good guys and bad guys. And if we're and one of the things about saying, well, everything comes from God is recognizing that you can't always so neatly divide things into good and bad. So I also think that may also be part of what's going on here, especially since we are, made in the image of God.
Well, I think the actual translation is Elohim, which is plural, which is the source of creation, which is chaotic by nature. So humans are made in the image of creation,
Okay,
which
that's
is
interesting.
inherently chaotic. So that's
Interesting.
one possible interpretation.
Well, there's also the inclinations, the good inclination, the
Mhm.
bad inclination. The Zohar is very clear about it in many ways.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Right. I'm just because recognizing time here, I keep having this issue with the sharing screen. Um, let's see if it'll work this time. Okay, I just want to point out a couple. Can you see this? Kol Yaducha here, the all shall thank you.
No,
You don't see all shall thank you?
now I do.
Okay. I just to point. I just want to point out some of the things that are part of this first blessing. Um, it's really about heavenly lights. It's about creation, but primarily talking about light and darkness. And one of the things that I think it's important for understanding these prayers is recognizing that they were written before telescopes. They were written before we landed somebody on the moon. They were written in a time where even if you were more of a rationalist, if you're like Maimonides, or somebody immersed in Greek philosophy, and Maimonides, for example, didn't believe that angels existed literally as sort of these beings, but that they represented cosmic forces. They represented things that moved the world. Um, but nonetheless, I think since in the modern world we've lost a lot of the mystery behind what's behind the heavens. Now we know, I've said so. we have a sense we've sent people up there. We have pictures. I mean, unless you're a flat earther, you know, most people accept that we have a better understanding of what's above the sky. But the people who wrote these prayers really didn't. And so I think as a result, the idea of experiencing God in just by looking up at the sky might have hit a little differently, might have felt a little different. That being said, I'm not trying. What I'm not trying. I'm not trying to say that today we've lost the wonder of mystery or divinity in science and in nature. I think it comes out in different ways. But when we're reciting these prayers, there is this sort of throwback to this old idea that when you look up, that God is up there, behind, moving the heavens, directing the stars, directing the heavenly hosts, and that this idea that God's sort of behind the forces of nature is really embedded in this prayer. And I also think particularly time, that these are the ways in which we organize our life by the stars, by the sun, by how, today we have everything's electronic, or we have watches and clocks and Outlook calendars, and that changes also how we relate to the world around us, because we don't rely on the world around us to know what time it is in the way that we once did. So there is some distance between, I think, modern human beings and the people who wrote these prayers, but I think there's still a lot we can learn from them. But if you look at the English, you could see that there's, certainly it's about, a lot of it is about just heavenly bodies and the, astronomy. Just read the Ella Don. It's one of my favorite poems. It's one of the oldest ones that gets put in the Siddur. There's evidence of it going as old as to the earliest versions of collections of Jewish prayers have Ella Don in it. And here we begin to anthropomorphize these heavenly forces as angels, and you can begin to see that. Just going to go through these quickly. Shabbat is part of, as this is specifically for Shabbat, as part of creation. So we're talking about the beauty of nature. On Shabbat, we talk about Shabbat being part of that creation. And here again, angels. I'm going through this part quickly because we don't have a lot of time. I want to get to, there's a meditation I want to teach about Shema. But there's one line here, though, I cannot skip. And that is this line here. HaMechadesh b'tuvo b'chol yom tamid ma'aseh bereshit. With divine goodness, God renews daily the continuing work of creation. I think it's not a literal translation, but it gets the point that that according to our Siddur, the world wasn't created once, but that the world there's a constant process of creation. And that in saying these prayers, that we are recognizing each day that there's new hope, that there's something that's continual going on, that this isn't it isn't a one and done deal. Just wanted to point that out.
Rabbi Dave,
Yes, please.
my partner is a theoretical physicist,
Hmm.
and his work has been in quantum mechanics.
Hmm.
And he has made very clear, which you can read in other sources. I don't mean it just him saying it. It's well known and understood that the world is being created anew all the time.
Oh, wow.
Because the smallest particles that make up the atoms, appear and disappear in fractions of a nanosecond. Okay, they go back into what's called the quantum phone, but nothing. Okay, and they reappear. And if they stopped even for that fraction of a nanosecond, the entire physical world would disappear.
Oh,
I find this the most profound mystical teaching imaginable. Okay, and I can get a source if you're interested.
I would love to see it. It's
To
I
me,
actually, I actually like to think of God as an infinite quantum fluctuation and superposition, which, as Einstein says, the more he studies math, the more he understands God.
So it's a great segue just to one reflection on this, is that if we don't have the same sense of awe at the heavens that our ancestors did, just at the sky itself, that quantum physics is actually one of the places where I think people really have looked at just more mystical approaches to the world, trying to find God in the world. Whether it's accurate to all quantum whether so here I'm quoting this one. I found this one quote. Whether other physicists would agree with him, I don't know. But the idea that we're going to try that our consciousness or the way we observe the world affects it. The idea, all of these things have been used by people to find a deeper spiritual meaning in nature as we understand it today. And I think many of those things are, I think, especially looking at light and the idea of like photons, the idea that the Einstein-Rosen-Podolsky effect, the idea that if two photons split, that if you reflect one to go in one direction, the other one will suddenly move as well, even though they're far apart from each other. Like those kinds of things have really,
Spooky action at a distance.
yes, no, exactly.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, those kinds of things
Right.
have really there's a lot of just awe at nature in that. Um, all right. The second blessing of the Shema goes from this, I think, very universal and universalistic idea of God having created the world to the more particular to being to more of a Jewish idea. And this one is a little, I don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to just mention where I think some people do struggle with this prayer, which is just generally the idea of chosenness. And this is really the blessing that talks about chosenness. Some people struggle with the idea of chosenness. Some people are more comfortable with it. Personally, you know, I, I understand why people struggle with it, and but I also understand that it's that every culture has had some idea of it of their own specialness in some way. So it doesn't bother me so much. Um, but one of the things that I often say, that people, those who come to services, have heard me say this before, that I think once you've said that you have this vast creation, from both the heavens and beyond, then we're so small within that creation, and it's so easy to be lost in it. The idea that we now are given Torah, that we're now given, that our ancestors are given Torah, that we have this family tradition, that we have mitzvot, that we have a guide, a sense of something to guide us. The idea that we have a mind, that we have intuitions. This blessing, by the way, is also if you there. I didn't mention it with the morning blessings. One of the morning blessings is the blessing to say over the Torah and study of Torah. It's supposed to be your blessing for studying Torah that day. If for whatever reason you've skipped that, this blessing counts as a blessing for studying Torah. Just practically speaking, uh, this is also the place where people who wear talit will gather the fringes together. There have been different, often connected to the line "V'havienu l'shalom arba'am kanfot haaretz," the bringing people together from the four corners of the world. Um, so here it's the idea of the unity of the Jewish people. But the end line, "Habocher b'amo Yisrael ba'ava," who lovingly chose your people Israel. Here he says for your service. It's not actually in the original Hebrew, but I think that is a one interpretation of it, is that being chosen for service and not just being chosen to be better, to be treated better. That's one way that people have dealt with it. But I know people struggle with it, and also for some people, it's not such a struggle. Unfortunately, we don't have so much time, so I would love to talk about that another time. What I want to get to just in our last few minutes is the Shema itself. Um, so couple things just to point out. I know in Mishkan Tefillah, so what gets used in Temple Israel and in Reform synagogues in general, they'll have this opening paragraph, the same as we have in Sidur Chadash, the V'ahavta paragraph, but it's actually this next page that is very different. That if you look in so this page is V'haya im shamoa tishma'u el mitzvotai, which means that if you listen to what God says, he'll make it rain, your crops will do well, everything will be good. And if you don't, then the rain will stop, your animal, nothing will go well. And that really, if you listen to God, good things will happen. If you don't listen, bad things will happen. And I know I definitely understand why it was removed from certain Sidurim, because of just especially in a post-Holocaust world. And I think there's a lot here that we could talk about. One just quick thing to point out about it. I often read this with both sometimes metaphorically and spiritually to understand that if I take care of myself spiritually, then even if bad things happen in life, there's still this sort of spiritual strength. There's this awareness that I, the rains come, the rains of blessing come internally, even if externally they're not apparent. And then other times it's just important to remind myself that there still are consequences for our actions, even if we can't always point out, and even if we can't always point out a clear, like, oh, this is justice, that, or something bad happens to you, that must mean you deserve it. Even if we certainly wouldn't say that, but the idea that, yeah, there are consequences to my actions. If I don't eat a good diet, my cholesterol level goes up. It might not be true for everyone, but it's definitely true for me. And finally, we have the final paragraph, which is in Mishkan Tefillah as well, is about tzitzit. Um, just for people who aren't familiar with the custom, whenever you say the word tzitzit or fringes, there's custom of kissing it. Um, I always thought that was a beautiful custom. And that tzitzit in general are understood to be a reminder of our obligations to live an ethical life and to follow Torah. So now I want to just get to this meditation.
Can I just ask a quick?
Please, yeah, how?
Okay, so just this is about custom. I mean, I know everyone stands for the Amidah. I know everyone stands for the Baruch Hu. I know everyone stands for the Kaddish. I know in Orthodox we sit for the Shema,
Yeah,
but in Reform they stand.
they stand. Yeah,
Why the difference with that in particular prayer?
that is a good question. Actually, I don't know the answer. I had heard it. I'm not recalling it. That's a good question to ask, though. I'll look into it. I will look into it. But there's also another thing that's different is reciting the Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto line out loud.
Right, you
No,
say it.
it
Right.
drives me
Undertone.
crazy.
Yeah,
Right. So that's one of the,
it's an
so in
undertone.
more traditional communities, they'll say it silently, except on Yom Kippur. Reform communities say it out loud, generally say it out loud, uh, always. And it's a really good question.
I thought the halacha around the Shema being sitted was that you were supposed to say it upon the way that you come upon it, right? That you could do it standing or you could do it sitting, but the law was that you should just do it as
as your That is one way, because there is the rabbinic tradition. Basically, there's a debate because we say the words ubeshochav kumecha, when you lie down and when you get up. So there are those who say it, oh well, you should be saying it while standing, or you should be saying it while you're lying down. And
yeah.
then we hold like Hillel, who says, nah, you can do it either way. It's actually about the time you say it. You say it in the morning when you wake up. You say it in the evening, the time when people go to sleep.
They
Um,
also say you can do it on a treetop or on a mountain or on there's a
mhm.
debate of for all the places you can say it. That sounds a bit like Dr. Seuss.
That's, all right.
We
I want to end with just this, just some sources that for a meditation on Shema that I've been doing for years. Um, the first is on the meaning of Shema itself. And there are many interpretations. What does it mean when we say God is one? And one interpretation I think is that, there's only one God, which I think is a very reasonable interpretation as opposed to polytheistic religions. But Hasidic interpretations have taken it slightly different. This is from the Baal Shem Tov. The translation is Aryeh Kaplan's. Just we'll read. We say, Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. When we say the Lord is one, we mean that nothing other than God exists in all the universe. It is thus written, the whole earth is filled with his glory. The main idea here is that a person should consider himself like absolutely nothing, should realize that he has no essence other than his divine soul, and that this is a portion of God from on high. Therefore, nothing exists in the world except the absolute unity, which is God. The main idea of this unity is that the whole earth is filled with his glory. There is therefore absolutely nothing that is devoid of his essence. Now, just to put out there, for some people, the idea that we are nothing isn't, There was a famous line that was from a psychologist, a Buddhist psychoanalyst who was also Jewish, but about before you have to be something before you can be nothing was the line that was said, meaning that one of the problems that some people have encountered with sort of more mystical practices is that somebody who suffers from chronic depression, dysthymic disorder, other things, psychological disorders, the idea of saying, well, I'm nothing may actually be dangerous. So I understand that some people are hesitant about it. And so that's why I'm going to teach this meditation in two parts. But the first part is really, if you feel like, yeah, if you're comfortable with this idea, go ahead with it. If not, you can skip to the second part. Before I teach the meditation, I'm just gonna read another thing, which is from the Kabbalist Chaim Vital. It says that the Shema recital consists of 248 words. For through this recital, the 248 limbs, organs of one's soul undergo repair. So I'm gonna stop sharing here and just gonna teach this. I'm just gonna do this very quick meditation. When I recite Shema, what I do is I actually imagine that starting at my toes, really, I'll be sitting and I'll imagine a sort of a ball of light at my toes, sort of going up my legs, and as it goes up, sort of taking my body with it. So I imagine like my body sort of disappearing into this ball of light, and then going up my spine, and going down and back up my arms, sort of taking, and then up my head, up sort of the back of my head, up through to my forehead, where some would say the third eye, the tefillin mark is, and that I sort of become this ball of light and merge with light of God, whatever that means. For me, I take it just sort of it's a very literal meditation. I allow its meaning to mean something different every time. And then I recite Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed, and I imagine that light that sort of shakes, that there's this power that then lowers the ball of light down to my heart. Now, as I say the lines, Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol le'avcha, love the Lord your God with all your heart, I imagine that light forming my heart. V'chol nafshecha v'chol me'odecha. And here, let me then I imagine that I imagine it rising up towards my mouth and forming my mouth, and that gets to the second, that it should be something that you speak. That's in the words of the Shema, something that you speak. Here, let me just it's funny trying to remember this while I say this all the time, but it forms the shinantim levanecha, and you teach it to your children. Here, it's your teeth. The shinun is for shinayim, are teeth. B'shiftecha, when you sit. So then I imagine it going back down, sort of forming my butt, basically. Uvelechtecha v'derech, and then when you walk on your way, and forming my legs. Ubashochcha kumecha, when you lie down, when you get up. So I imagine it, the light then going back up my spine, forming my torso. Ukshartam la'ot al yadecha, you tie it as a sign on your arms. So if I'm wearing tefillin, I actually try to imagine the light sort of going around my arm, but it begins to form my arms. And it becomes a symbol between your eyes. So I imagine going back to this point, to my tefillin spot, forming my head. And you write it on the mezuzot of your house and in your gates. I then imagine this sort of that light that has formed my body going outward, filling the room, connecting to other people who I also imagine having done the same thing, and filling the room, and then going out to the world as a whole. I wanted to share that because it's a meditation I've done for a while. It's better, I wonder in hindsight if maybe I could have cut some of the earlier stuff and really spent more time teaching that meditation. But it's something that I now can do it very quickly. But also, if I have time to say Shema to myself, I will say each part very slowly and imagine like just my whole body being sort of remade in divine light. And that's a meditation that I like to do. Um, any comments or questions about that or about anything we've said so far?
Would you
Doing
Would
this.
you send us an annotated
I can
Shema,
send it.
which you,
Sure,
thank you.
absolutely. And Wendy, you were going to say something?
Signing the Ve'ahavta Hafta in sign language is the visual of everything that you said. You can, it's like the signs have you lying down and you see the tefillin and you're kissing the mezuzah.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's
Can you
everything.
sign it? Can you sign it for us, Wendy?
Yeah,
Not at the moment because I don't have the prayer in front of me. So
I wonder if that's been, I bet there are YouTube videos of it though. I have to take a look. That's really cool.
yeah.
Right. Any other comments? Because I know now it's after 7:30. It's a 7 past, it's 7:37. I want to make sure that I let people go. But any other questions or comments on this?
I just want to say
This was a great class.
the what you were saying at the end about the release of the power and the energy within your body. When we had Torah study last week, Reb Deb from Beres Shalom had an illustration of the human body, and the letters were in there, and it was just such a powerful graphic. It was amazing. And she was saying the same thing you are.
Right. And that's I also last week in our class here we had we had an image of that too. So
that's right. Yeah.
It is that's a meditation I've been doing for years. I've been fortunate to teach it in certain circumstances. I do think though that the opening part, for some people, the idea of sort of giving up themselves into like, is hard. And I want to honor that. It isn't for everyone. But the second part is definitely is definitely doable. And if you like the first part, you could do that as well. Great. Thank you so much. We are going to be meeting again for our final session next week. Same link, same time. And we're going to focus on some of the stuff that we didn't get to today, and also I say about what it means to lead tefillah. And I think fundamentally we all are able to lead tefillah. And even if the Hebrew escapes you or it's something that you're not able to do for a variety of reasons, the idea of taking a leadership role in community for tefillah in what I really fundamentally believe is it's town hall meeting with God, communal prayer is it's something that can be very important and it can really open up some of the meaning of the prayers and also push some of our relationships so we can become closer and understand each other better. Right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you very much.
Rabbi. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Rabbi, can I ask you a quick question?
Sure. Let me stop recording.
Could you also write